again everyone. This is my second part to my anxiety beating tips, and in the first video that I did about beating anxiety, we were looking at things which involved around getting out of your comfort zone. As young people, and it's specifically children and adolescents I'm talking about as opposed to adults, getting children and adolescents to move out of their comfort zones can be a pretty difficult task. You will find that your children may absolutely, go to a new experience with open arms, and that really helps, doing something different. And in my last video, I talked about maybe trying some different extreme sports where you're in control, so like snowboarding, sledging, winter sports, ice skating, something that has not been done before. But of course, that's not for everyone. And equally, some things can be quite expensive. And so, again, not for everyone. So what I wanted to talk about was activities or things that people can do, young people can do, which are less expensive and don't necessarily take them out of a comfort zone as much as doing something more extreme would allow. So maybe starting off with these things would be a good idea. And everything is worth having a go to help our young people to overcome their depressions, their anxieties. Of course, there's nothing better than actually going to the GP and discussing any issues with them, and of course seeing a counsellor. However, counselling doesn't always work for everyone. There's a lot of kids that would prefer to try and go it alone. It's not always advisable. It is better to try and see a professional, either one that the NHS can provide, going through CAMHS, which isn't ideal for a lot of people because there's a huge wait list, or, paying privately and speaking to somebody on a very caring basis like that. What you can encourage your children or your teenagers to do is work with the 8 Steps to Happiness, which is a lovely list of things that can be worked on one a week or can be worked on daily, but something where the children or the adolescents have a focus for that week. So one of the things to do, and this works especially well for teenagers, is to help them create a vision board, have them set goals for themselves, whether it's just to pass certain exams, whether it's to get through the week at school, whether it's to complete some homework, something that is achievable in the short term, and then moving on to something that is more life affirming. So perhaps getting results to go into college. If that's causing distress or anxiety, then maybe even just something smaller than that, moving on to help you with the shopping, perhaps taking up a sport, perhaps joining a social club, something which they really want to move towards and think about, and put a vision board up which shows the steps that they can use to get there and to take to achieve that goal. Another lovely one, and I think this works well with younger children as well as adolescents, is to think about random acts of kindness. That could just be saying hello to someone in the street, which of course, if you're feeling vulnerable or anxious, is a huge thing for someone to do. And of course, it can start with a smile. It can start with a small hello and building into a conversation. And of course, that links as well to the achievable goals too. Number 3 in the 8 Steps to Happiness is mindfulness and mindful living. Now, a lot of healthcare professionals who deal with mental crises will talk about mindfulness is just being in that moment of calm and stability. And that can just be 5 minutes laying on the bed. That can be, in your private time. So your children, when they're in the bath or the shower, can just take a moment just to listen to the water, listen to birdsong outside, but they're in a safe place. And sometimes moving on from the mindful thinking, the random act of kindness may come about. So something that the children and the adolescents want to do, even if it's just, pushing a thank you card through the door of a neighbour's house who's perhaps done something for them, or a birthday card, making a birthday card for somebody. Again, it all links back to those achievable goals that eventually, the young person is trying to come forward to. And we can use those then to help the young person or the adolescents to find a little bit of stability and push through the anxiety a little bit more, because they're working on themselves. So before I go on with the 8 steps to happiness, that's what we're trying to achieve here, is that the young person finds a happiness within themselves, and finds their situation, their everyday situation, whatever's causing their anxiety, that it starts to reduce. And that's the idea. So you're finding happiness and reducing the anxiety. Okay, so linking into the achievable goals, which was the number 1 on our list, number 4 is recognizing our strengths and finding solutions if there is a weakness somewhere. So your teenager or your young person maybe have a really good strength of being caring, may have a strength of something creative, may have a strength something academic, may have a personal strength. And what we look to with that is to use those strengths to benefit themselves as well as other people. And again, this links back into the random acts of kindness, to the card, to the drawing, to helping somebody achieve something of their own, which then gives us a little bit of happiness and pride that we've done something, and then we can go back to our vision board and tick something off of there. A lovely thing that a lot of people do anyway in their lives, but something I feel that young people and especially adolescents could benefit from, is gratitude, and thinking about every morning what they are grateful for as they wake up, and then also thinking about what they're grateful for when they go to sleep. It could just be that they have clean clothes, there's hot water in the house, that they've had somebody who's listened to them. It only has to be 1 or 2 things, and even if they come home from school and they're feeling really anxious, they've got a home to come to. And I think as a parent, we have to encourage our children just to think about those things, those small things, that we have a television, or they have a games console, they have books. They may not be feeling it right at that moment, of course, but if we can encourage them ourselves, it gives them something to think about. And while they're thinking about the gratitude, they can also be thinking back to their vision board, perhaps even thinking, well, I have a game or a book that I don't need, I could give that to somebody else who would be grateful for it, and then that links to the random acts of kindness as well. Depending on the circumstance, and depending on what has perhaps made the children angry or anxious or depressed, is to write a letter of forgiveness to that person who has perhaps had a negative impact on their lives. It could be a teacher, it could be a member of the family, it could be a stranger that they've met, and let those feelings out and let them go. Once that letter has gone, any resentment, any grudges that you may be feeling can be passed away from that person. And it can be the smallest thing. It doesn't have to be something where somebody has been bullied or attacked. It could simply be, something that seems relatively small, like somebody borrowed a pen and never gave it back. Those things can impact somebody who is suffering with anxiety, or, has made them feel sad. And it's sort of that catalyst, isn't it, that causes that roller coaster of emotions that they don't necessarily want to be feeling. So a letter of forgiveness to that person, because when we're thinking about, as adults, we can think about a situation and maybe that person just didn't realize that they'd taken that pen. Maybe that person didn't realize that, they had jumped the queue. Maybe that person who overtook was driving erratically was actually rushing to get to a hospital. We put ourselves into a different position. It is harder for children to see that, and adolescents to see that, because they think really black and white. And so we can encourage those grey areas to come out. We can encourage them to go, well, you know what, that person who took that toy from you maybe hadn't realised that it was yours, maybe thought it was from the toy box. Maybe they haven't got one at home. Maybe their parents, are not forthcoming with money, maybe not forthcoming with toys. You know, there's lots of scenarios that we can put together and then create that letter of forgiveness for. Once that letter is done, it can be burned, buried, something where it's gone and it's out of the way. And using the letter of forgiveness, we can also look at journaling for adolescents as well. Writing those thoughts and feelings down, actually getting to grips with those emotions and letting them go, letting them come out in a healthy way. And that's hugely important. So keeping a journal of emotions that's hidden away, once those words are out and on the page and they're staring back at you, the power of them is less than if they were milling around in our heads. And again, burning the letter, burying the letter, even just screwing it up and throwing it away. And the same with the journal. Once the journal is completed, it can be thrown away. And the journal can have a private time too. You know, your children would be able to, when they come home, if they feel they have to get their emotions out, at that point is a good idea. If they've had a bad day in school, just before bed, in the morning, you know, as they practice their gratitude, or as just after or just before they do some mindfulness. Okay, so the seventh one I think is hugely important, and it's also perhaps one of the more tricky ones for adolescents especially, is to build up a social network. And I'm not talking about online Snapchat, WhatsApp, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being able to go out with friends. It's hugely important. When we isolate ourselves away, we tend to then start to think about things. And when you're on your own and you're left with your thoughts, they ruminate, and that's when catastrophizing starts to happen. And we don't always manage to bring that back, and the anxiety can build, so that when we are face to face with somebody, we've already put a scenario in our heads that we're expecting, and even if it doesn't come about, it's still there, it's ruminating. When you're out and you have physical contact with friends, and that's to see somebody face to face, we start to understand that our friendships are really more important than what's on our phones. We can go out for walks together, we chat together, time can be lost, and that's the important bit. We want to lose ourselves a little bit in time. We want to be able to go out with friends at 10 o'clock in the morning and then not realize how much time has passed until we actually actively go ahead and look at our watch, or we know, oh, I'm hungry, it must be lunchtime. Those physical social interactions of where we're able to speak to our friends, see our friends face to face, have so much benefit and really help out. Now, the problem with this, with teenagers especially, young children will be able to focus a little more because they'll be able to play, and they can play games. Teenagers, unfortunately, don't tend to behave that way. And what we find is that if somebody has said something in a friendship group, the friendship group can be split. So we go back to the idea of creating different groups of friends who have different interests, and that can also be built from social activities. So joining a club, beginning a sport, doing a hobby, and those areas, and a class, an orchestra, something like that, where we can meet other people and share other experiences with. So not just the people in school. And a lot of teenagers tend to do that, tend to stick to their friendship group that they made in school, and it's not always a healthy place to make friends. So coming out of that, making friends in different places is much better. So taking a class, joining an activity, joining a club where you will see new faces and make new connections of something that you're interested in. Your friends in school might not have the same interests as you do. So, and as adults, you know, we work, we make friends, we have friends who live, who are neighbours, and then we may go out and seek other friends from other places, you know, joining different sports classes, going to the gym, etc. So having different groups of friends is really essential to that happiness, because you know, you'll say to yourself, okay, it's Friday, I'm going to this class. It's Tuesday, I'm going to go out with my friends from school. It's Wednesday, I'm joining this group. and we keep a good social connection there. And again, that can go back to the vision board of what our goals are. You know, we want to climb Mount Everest, then we join a rock climbing club, or we join a walking group or something like that, and then we make those social connections. Lastly, I think it's important because we do want to make a change for ourselves, and our teenagers and young people want to make a change for themselves. And their school years, my parents would always say, oh, the best years of my life. But we know that's not always true, because our young people have so many more pressures on them, and their social network connections online can be so damaging sometimes too. So our last step is to reflect on ourselves. So maybe even when we're writing that letter of forgiveness, it's perhaps writing a letter of forgiveness to ourselves, so that we can grow from those experiences and we can harness the positive aspects of those experiences too. We want to review what we have done with our lives so far and where we want to go, hence the vision board. We want to practice all those things. We want to be able to reflect on our gratitude. We want to sit in those moments of mindfulness. We want to renew our friendships and rebuild our friendship groups. So that's our 8 steps to happiness. And it's one that I think actively needs to be encouraged with our teenagers especially, but some of these things can be used for our young people too.